Hi, Rachel. Recording. So this is something new for me, kind of a new project. My intention is to interview people I think are doing amazing work in the world, like kind of helping people transform their lives in a very powerful way. And in this interview to kind of translate what these people do to a like 5-year-old language or a grandmother language, like so that basically anybody could understand what's going on and if it's useful for them. And my second intention is, because I live in Russia, I want to expose Russian community to this very high quality transformations. So I'll be specifically kind of translating to Russian community that I'm in. This is Rachel from Embodied Intimacy.
Thanks for thinking about me for this interview and inviting me on to explore in your playground of consciousness.
So like this Russian community that I'm in, it's mostly men, successful men, like in their 30s, 40s. They're from like IT or business, and they have powerful minds, and they started to like develop their consciousness and make themselves more flexible and open and free. And this is kind of the audience that we're speaking to. So let's every question, and it is like in 3 sentences. What is the essential purpose of embodied intimacy?
Yeah. So embodied intimacy is a co-creative space where people can come and find out what it means to be fully occupying the space of their body in relationship with their authentic truth, and able to share that truth in real time in an experience with another being, which will cultivate a level of intimacy together.
Okay, that was a very complex sentence. Like really, really complex sentence.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think a 5-year-old would be able to follow it.
Okay, so you want me to go a little bit simpler?
3 short sentences. Can you do that?
Okay. So embodied intimacy is about coming back into the body, relating in presence and real time, and in that experience finding intimacy. I don't know if a 3-year-old would understand the word intimacy, but finding intimacy.
That was like really awesome. So coming back to the body, being present in a relationship with others, and finding intimacy from that.
Yeah, like in that experience of merging, intimacy expands or happens, or there's an expansion which I call intimacy.
Okay. So I think 5-year-old would kind of get this, except the word intimacy, maybe merging.
Yeah.
So let's explore that. Like, what is intimacy for you? What are you inviting people into, like intimacy? Because I know people like the first time I told guys about embodied intimacy, someone was like,
Yeah.
intimacy? What are we
Yeah.
gonna do there?
Yeah. Yeah. Intimacy is one of those words now, and I have a lot to share about it on a separate sheet about how it's being used, especially in the kind of sexuality space. And I think typically a lot of people reserve intimacy for sexuality. It's like you wait until you've just made love to someone and then you're in bed looking at them, and that kind of afterglow can be what we think of as intimacy, or even just the physical act of being sexual with someone. But for me, it's actually like all the things leading up to the moment where I would want to be sensual or sexual with someone. And even I share intimacy with so many people that I would never want to be sexual with. For me, intimacy is that moment where I'm with someone and I'm drop out of my mind space, my thinking mind space, into this vast limitlessness where time doesn't exist anymore. And it's me and my truth and you and your truth. And in that space, we find this like shared separate entity or being that is you and me in this present moment, alive right here, right now. Like that experience I have with so many people. And that for me is intimacy. That's the most intimate experience I can have with a being or a soul, is where we cease to exist as separate and there's a merging that happens.
Dropping into a shared space
Mm.
where like this shared space actually starts doing something. It
Yeah,
starts to move as one,
yeah,
and that is intimacy.
yeah.
When we can uh, relax our defenses, let's say, enough so that there is
Mm,
some merging in between us,
mm,
and this in between starts to move us.
mm. Yes. The meeting point, like
The meeting
there's a
point.
meeting point that happens when my eyes meet your eyes, and there's this meeting point, and in that meeting point some kind of information is shared energetically or like uh, and in that experience the veil is lifted
Mhm.
and something is moving us. We're no longer needing to think about what happens next or having a projection or a fantasy or an idea. Like life is just moving us.
I want to touch a little bit of about like thinking.
Yeah.
Uh, you said that like the thinking mind stops, don't need to think, but can we actually experience intimacy while thinking together?
Well, I think so. I do think that there's like an intellectual intimacy as well. And this would be something different than what I'm describing right now. But I do feel that some people like really get off and find someone else um, uh, through shared ideas and concepts and that are sacred and dear to our hearts. And I think in that experience, there can be a kind of intellectual intimacy.
Mhm. Probably like emotional intimacy as a separate uh,
Yeah, and then there's
and
emotional, physical intimacy.
bodily, physically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, and probably the best one of them is when they all combine.
Mm, mm. Yeah.
And there is like a at one moment it's just physical intimacy with some emotional, and then it's sprouts an intellectual conversation, and then drops back into the bodily contact or something like
Mm.
that.
I mean, best is also relative. I know many people who best is intellectual intimacy because they're not so much into the body. For me, best is like soul intimacy.
Yeah.
That's the
And
best. That's my favorite.
yeah, that's the meeting point for us was actually, I think, these words.
Mm.
Um, and so coming back to what you do as embodied intimacy, your kind of doorway into this meeting point is
Mm.
through the body.
Yes, exactly.
And how exactly does it look like? What what is going on? Like how you draw people into this meeting point? What do they do?
Yeah. So I'll use a little bit of a spectrum. I mean, in general, we're mostly moving more through like yin space, which is more like a feminine, receptive, slowing down openness. But I would say that our work is on a spectrum. So from like intimacy, which I'll use like more yin and slowing down, and to intensity. And I believe you can find intimacy in both sides, from the yin to the intensity. So sometimes what it looks like is slowing way down, and in a way connecting our bodies and our breath to co-regulate our nervous systems, which allows us to drop into a state of extreme relaxation and openness. And in that space, allowing the intimacy to merge from relaxation and kind of this like pure, innocent essence. And then there's the other end of the spectrum, which would be more the intensity, which is more like going for it, like unleashing the wild animal and being fully alive and fully embodied and full force. And in that experience, where a lot of people have never been seen or accepted or like before, there's a deep intimacy that comes there from the expression of being received in and honored in the intensity, the wild animal. So we're kind of working on both ends and then sometimes in between. But it's always, the starting point is always the body.
Relaxation and the play, let's say intense play, they are kind of mutual with the partner.
Mm.
You do it together, right?
Yeah.
With somebody. And so you relax together. You kind of allow yourself to feel safe in the presence of the other. And based on that, you are able to actually really, really play with high level of intensity, like whatever you wanna express, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Cool. So what happens with people when they do that? What do they get out of it?
What do they get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, I've relaxed, I've played, and now what changes in me?
So I think that a lot of people, generally in life, we are not physically connecting with other beings. Like in a modern day person's general life with work and social, like generally you're not physically connecting with another person unless you're probably having sex with them, which is why I think so many people think intimacy is sexuality. So what we're basically doing is giving people a place and a context for how to physically touch and be together physically in our bodies that isn't explicitly sexual. Yeah. So what people get out of that is they get all the nourishment of what feels like what sexuality is reserved for, like deeply touched and seen and heard and felt on a level that is beyond what they could think with their mind or think into manifestation, but actually just allowing the animal to have a chance to express itself and be felt. And usually for me, depending on someone's level of physicality and being met in this way, it opens up a whole new universe of possibility. All of a sudden, the pressure on a romantic partner lessens. The desire to be met in this way increases. And a whole new wisdom comes out of this. Listening is the best way I can call it. It's like so few people are actually listening to what's happening and what their body is communicating to them on a moment to moment basis. So it's like, it's almost like a new language is what you get, is like this wisdom, this embodied knowing coming through to guide the way instead of coming from the thinking mind.
So what do people get is they uh, separate in an experiential way kind of physical contact and physical intimacy closeness from sexuality. Uh, they understand that there is a need in them for kind of just physical contact, not in a sexual way, that they actually need this and want this, and they can ask for it
Yeah.
after because they know.
Yeah.
And they have a language for understanding their bodies and expressing it,
Yeah.
the needs, right?
Beautifully. Yeah. Beautifully recaptured.
Now, how would it look in daily life? Imagine like some person from office job with regular people who don't do any transformations, who has like a partner and parents, and they come to your workshop and they experience all this and understand all this, and now they come home
Mm-hmm.
and how do they, I mean, in your experience, how do people integrate this
Mm-hmm.
new wisdom in their normal daily lives?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a wide spectrum here again, and it's very relative to someone's life. But the first kind of, I would say, base layer would be a deeper listening. Like I said before, like this is the
Mhm.
biggest takeaway is, oh my God, there's actually now all this information here that I've either not been listening to or pushing away or not trusting. And now I have access to it. And I can make just basic decisions in my life based off of what's happening for me in my body. So this is one that's pretty easy for anyone. It's like it's almost like permission or access to a language that was always being spoken, but we're just kind of like we are further developing that neural pathway. Yeah. So if like the neural pathway to the belly is shut off and we're not actually using that route, we're further developing that. So there's more access. That's kind of like a basic. I would say that in relationships, people spend more physical time together with their partner that isn't just sexual. So there's some practices we have like belly to belly and primal play, and I see couples integrating this into their life and how they connect, like as a transition point. You know, we both come home from work, and before we have dinner or before we talk, we spend 10 to 20 minutes just breathing together or play fighting or wrestling or just moving our bodies to dance together, if like just some way that there's a transition point, and so that we find the physical embodied meeting point before we continue. And then I think with people in a larger communal context is they find out how much value there is for them to be surrounded by people who value touch and being physically close. So what I see is the people who come to these events now start to prioritize being in those kinds of spaces, either continuing to go to those kinds of spaces and seek more out, or creating those spaces like inviting people over for a cuddle party, or going to more dance events or taking up yoga. There's ways that you can have a kind of self-regulated embodiment practice, and there's ways what I would call a co-regulated, which is embodied with another person. Yeah. So it's kind of both, but I see that there's a higher priority in their lives to bring this in and seek it out on a day-to-day basis, because there's so many different places you can take embodiment. Yeah. One way is into intimacy, and there's other ways as well.
So for partners, it like people bring home kind of a new way to meet,
Yeah.
and like more opportunities to meet inside the day and actually attune to each other.
Yes.
Uh, and also people start to kind of mm, reprioritize their lives and maybe spend more time in contexts that give them this physical embodied experience that they actually find out they need,
Yes.
right? But people still have to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how does it feel like for people in very disembodied environments? I mean, knowing that they actually need this,
Yeah.
animal needs it. How does it feel?
I think they get really frustrated. I mean, that's how I get too. When I find myself in one of these environments, I get really frustrated. Um, uh, and I think that there is, like, for me, the quickest, easiest route is through the breath. So we use a lot of breathing, or just like being more conscious about breathing and taking a deep breath and using the breath to listen and understand and regulate the body. So you can do this anywhere. I mean, if you're in a disembodied work environment, you can track your own breath. You can take some deeper breaths. You can come back into the body and feel and listen to the animal. So there's a kind of a way where you don't have to be surrounded by people like this to continue to develop your own awareness and practice of what it means to be fully embodied and alive and listening to the animal.
Yeah, it would be funny to breathe like that in a like work meeting. Um, okay. One thing that was for some time really interesting to me about your work, like, and it's my personal, how do I say it? Mm. So I really love kind of maps and
Mm,
stages and how something progresses in time. And people that are drawn to me, they like this too. They
mm,
kind of love to have an outline of what may happen.
mm,
If I go this way, what may happen with me and
mm,
in what time.
mm,
So do you have any kind of maps like that, like developmental stages? If people start to engage with your work,
mhm.
what happens with them? Like in what stages? Is there anything like that?
No, we don't currently have a map, but we do have a researcher who's
Mm.
currently working with us in a year-long training that we have, and she's trying to start to quantify what happens with people when they embark on a journey with us for a year, and where they start out and where they get to. But so this is something that's kind of in the process of being developed now, but it isn't um, information or research that we have available yet, but it's in the process.
That's super awesome. So I like have two inquiries.
Yeah.
Mm, First, like, okay, there is no data so far. There is no like map that you use, but is there any kind of your own intuitions, like your own observations that can group into uh, kind of categories of what happens? Like you work with people for like 4 years, 5 years.
Yeah.
Uh, there are probably some like regulars who work with you for.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm a little bit, I should have thought of this. And I wish I had something really brilliant to just bring to you. So it's a little bit on the spot. And so I can give some kind of basic ideas. And then I'm really curious to just explore this for myself deeper and with my community. But it's interesting because the people who've studied with us the longest, when they're in an event or a field with us and people find out like that person did the year-long training, they always say, all those people, they have something, they have a sparkle, and I want that. It's like it's a very interesting thing to see play out, that like in my experience, I'll say, like, and this is the spectrum, is a deeper relationship and knowing to myself, and a confidence in who I am and what I have to give to the world. And so this is the little buds that start out, are like little seeds that get planted, that it's part of this, like, a little bit of a cliche to say, but is like that I am the creator of my reality. Yeah. And there's people and there's schools and brilliant ways that people understand this conceptually or with consciousness or with thought that this is true. And then there's a second way, which is what we provide, which is that this is actually true with the body. So to change my reality, I change my body. And so people come initially and they understand what we're teaching on a conceptual level. Okay, I know that they're saying this, and then I went to a workshop and then I experienced it. I did something in the workshop and I changed my reality by changing my body. But they don't yet have the, it's not yet developed enough for them to do it themselves. So there's a reliance on coming back. Yeah. And coming back to, like, it's like working out a muscle, like working out the embodiment or intimacy muscle. And so what people get over time, the more that they embark on this journey and this work, and the more different contexts and situations they do it, they learn that in like our best student would be sitting, something would happen, be like, okay, right now I changed my body. I physically embody a new reality and thus change my actual reality. And then there's one level of doing this with yourself, like, oh, I'm triggered right now. Okay, I know if I go and blah, 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 then I will create a new reality where I'm not triggered and where I have more space to hold this activation. And then there's a second layer, which is kind of the additional, also more advanced layer, which is, and doing this in relationship. And then there's a further layer, which is not only doing this in relationship to one person, but doing this in a group dynamic. How to change the reality of the entire group by changing just your body.
What I'm hearing is you actually allow people to discover themselves as creators, as embodied creators.
Yes.
And they go through, like, first they create their individual reality, and
yes.
then they go and learn how to guide collective realities.
Yes.
Collective realities. Yeah. So this is very cool because in my work we are started to talking about like the creation part and becoming the super creator in the arms of like larger lives, let's say. And how people do that in your work is through changing their bodies, through embodying a new state and consciously choosing it. Like, I will be in that state and it ripples around me. Cool.
And as couples, it's similar. A couple can change their embodied, their embodied couple dynamic, which is a kind of feedback loop supporting itself. And a couple can become, a couple can also become creators of their reality and their coupleship. So, and then it bleeds out from there in a way.
Coming a little back to the office part.
Yeah.
Do you have like, are any of your students able to actually guide their office lives in very new directions, like in more embodied directions? Is something like that happening?
So we do have some like students who are also, business leaders and entrepreneurs, and there is it's starting to trickle in. And I wouldn't say it's had a whole, it depends on the business. You know what I mean? It's like, there are some businesses, especially in Berlin, and we have one of the guys here who's like, there are offices that understand like the aspect of team building and bonding as a team, and what that translates to for their business success. Right. But touching in a work environment is still so kind of taboo. Yeah. So the route right now that is used most is the breath. So like, for example, before a business meeting, let's take 3 deep breaths together as a group, because through the breath, we synchronize all of our individual nervous systems into one nervous system. And then now there's a collective harmony. So this is without touch. The way that we've been able to infiltrate the business sector is just through regulation of the breath. Those are the first kind of steps that are happening right now.
And, any positive feedback from that?
Tons of positive feedback. Yeah, I mean, there's never a time where us syncing up through the breath leads to anything but more harmony and connectedness. I mean, I just never heard of it.
Okay, but I mean, the real life examples are better.
Yeah, for sure.
Any real life examples you can like give?
No, I don't have one so much right now.
Okay,
I'm not deeply embedded in
okay,
this
okay.
piece.
So this is a part that's really interesting to me, like how this actually spreads to regular people.
Yeah,
How like there are people who are interested in transformations. Yeah, they will come to events, they will do processes, and then they go home. And I I want to see how it spreads in their normal environment. That they
yeah,
don't change the environment. They don't like leave their tribe, current tribe, but they stay
yeah,
and they become agents of change
yeah,
without actually maybe without inviting everybody to like the same events, but spreading it themselves.
yeah.
Uh,
So another way that this infiltrates that isn't through the business life is through family and children.
mm,
So there's a lot
mm,
of mothers specifically coming to our events and taking this home with their children and teaching their children how to breathe with them, to be in physical contact when the child gets angry, doing a primal play together
mm,
and moving the energy through the body and coming more connected as a family. And for this, I mean, I can send you testimonials and posts and like and with everything there's moments where it doesn't work, you know, because there's such a level of separation that we can't come closer through the body. So it is true, but what I hear and see is much stronger families, a wisdom that the children can, because kids are already so connected. Yeah, but it's like getting the parents in there with them and having a way like, wow, when mom is upset, I can place my hand on her heart and ask her to take 3 deep breaths with me. Like an empowerment through the child can also help to change reality.
mm. Yeah, this is very important, and uh, specifically, I don't know, maybe in a Russian context, there is a very big separation between fathers and children,
Mm,
and like fathers who go to work and provide and actually spend very little time with their children. And
yeah,
when they come together, I know from my personal experience, when fathers and children come together, they stay on this distance and they don't know how to touch each other. And the touch is kind of like
wow,
this. So this would be like, I mean, giving fathers and like a way of touching their children, I think that would be super awesome
mm,
for for fathers and children.
yeah,
Um, okay, second inquiry about
mm,
stages. You said about a researcher that's going to your year-long training and trying to uh, measure something.
yes,
Can you speak a little bit more about it? Like, what's the agenda? What is like,
yeah,
what is maybe any measurements that have been taken? Because this is also a big part of what we're trying to do, like to try to measure in at least somewhat objective way of what's going on and what
yeah,
changes over time.
exactly. And this is exactly what we're trying to measure or quantify is what is changing over time for people, because something very significant is changing in people's lives. And it's like, but how to like, it's like, which we call this actual thing. We've been calling it like um, yeah. Anyway, we have some. Uh, we were calling it like something blue, and then it's kind of turned into this idea of blue morpho, which is like because blue was a color for so long that wasn't identified as a color, but it existed. So it's like the un. Yeah. Anyway, um, so the other thing is that a lot of people don't so another big piece of our work that's embedded deeply into our work is around being trauma informed. Yeah, because so many, I mean, essentially anyone with a nervous system has experienced trauma, which is basically everyone. We all carry trauma.
What is trauma in 3 sentences? Very short.
Trauma is being alone with too much and tearing or splitting, period. When I'm alone with too much pain, I tear or I split, and that is a traumatic experience for me. So, and a lot of trauma happens in relationship. Yeah, so much happens. And so the only way for trauma to heal is in relationship. And so when we're working with intimacy and closeness, what usually comes up is the trauma that has created a defense or a block to that closeness, because that closeness represents or brings me back to my trauma. So we have to work a lot with trauma as the barrier to intimacy and closeness. So this is another one of the pieces that we're measuring, is someone's level of traumatic activation and the steps that they're able to take to heal or repair. Like, if trauma happens when we're alone with too much, healing happens when we're together with just enough. So that's essentially what we're doing, is bringing people together, embodied, relationally, consciously aware, with just enough to heal whatever's in between me and being close to someone else, which is usually past trauma. So this is one of the biggest pieces that we can actually quantify, because traumatic activation is so, people can describe, conceptualize what's happening in their body when they're traumatically activated. Yeah. So we're looking at it through this lens a lot, is the measurable aspect.
You gather kind of subjective reports.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
What was the level of traumatic activation when I started this training? How was my body responding to the trauma at the beginning of the training? And now at the end of the training, what's happening when those same traumatic experiences come up, and how am I responding now? And this is, again, part of the new reality creation piece.
That's similar to what we do, how we measure it. Like, we gather subjective reports over time.
Yeah.
And not only like with regards to activation parts, but just general, like how am I experiencing my current moment day to day? Like, is it free, clear, empty, flowing, or it's just contracted a little bit?
Great. Yeah.
Okay, that's very interesting. And anything like that you want to measure kind of more objectively, like blood tests, heart rate?
Yeah, that would be interesting. I don't think we're doing that right now. But those, heart rate would be super interesting, and would definitely relate to what we're doing.
Yeah. It will be like really easy to measure. Kind of you create some protocol and people do it for a week before training.
Yeah.
Like in the training and the week after.
Yeah, that would be super interesting. Yeah.
Okay. I think I've satisfied my curiosity.
Great.
What are the ways to engage with your work?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the biggest way is to come to an event that we do, usually mostly in Europe, and specifically Northern Europe. Another way is to just engage online. We have a big library of videos and content on Facebook. We just started an Instagram and a YouTube, so people can find Embodied Intimacy in these places. But my biggest suggestion is to come to an event, because that's where we meet physically, in this way.
As far as I know, next event is like this, starts this Friday in Amsterdam.
Yes, we have an event.
And I think 6 people from Russia will be there.
No shit.
Yep.
Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, two of them technically not from Russia, but they're Russians.
But they're Russians.
Uh, yeah,
Cool.
so it's spreading.
Yeah.
Okay, anything you wanna kind of sum it up for the 5-year-old Russian businessman?
Yeah, I mean, like, maybe I'll just kind of give a little, like, I just imagine, for any, like, there's a separate for a man and a woman, but especially for a man who is, in any way not 100% confident in connecting intimately with women, like, this would be the best training possible. Like, this is irresistible to women, is having this language developed, is how to be like intimacy is the doorway, in my opinion, to having deeply fulfilling relationships, especially sexually connected relationships. Like, the depth to which we can go sexually is supported by the foundation of how intimate we can be together. And this is both for men with women and men with men. So I know that there's still a lot of homophobia out there, but my personal opinion is you can only be as intimate with a woman as you can be with a man if you're a man. And so it's also like, finding the more platonic ways of physical closeness, because everything is a muscle that we're building. And if we build our intimacy muscle with one person, then we're kind of like, in my mind, is like imagining someone going to the gym and using just this machine every single time. And then you have a super big muscle here, but the rest of your body is puny. So it's like, we need new people and new reflections to work out and be like more fully matured in the ways that we can explore intimacy. And this is, I just see that this leads to so much more of a rewarding, fulfilling life when you can be fully expressed and seen and mirrored in multiple different aspects of yourself intimately, rather than just one.
You've touched a very, very strong point for Russian men.
Mm,
Uh, and but this is what is really, really lacking, like physical intimacy
yeah,
with no sexual agenda between
yeah,
men.
yeah,
And I see how sometimes I see men sitting together and actually craving it, but being very afraid at the same point, like
yeah,
wanting to touch, wanting to hug, but so socially unacceptable. We
yeah.
haven't been taught it. Uh,
Mm,
my our fathers stayed a very large distance from us.
yeah,
Uh, uh, yeah, and well, personally, I want to also come back to the opportunity to actually become physically close for Russian men without children.
yeah,
This is very no amount of consciousness work will give that.
no, yeah,
Very, very big amount. I mean, very, very big amount may give that,
yeah,
but I think it's better to do a small amount of specifically tailored work for
mm,
this.
mm,
I
mm,
just like this.
mm.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Igor. Super fun.
Yeah.